The one remaining method that I need to implement is the one that will update the attribute values for all of my remaining columns. So this is going to be called update adder. And it's going to take in the attribute name as well as the item and whether or not this is a checkbox. So is Boolean. If it is a Boolean, I'm going to get the value self.isItemChecked. And then just to be safe, because it is possible to edit the text, I'm going to force the text back to be nothing. So set item text is just an empty string. If this isn't a Boolean, then it's going to be a transform value, which is a floating point value, but it's being displayed as a string. So I'm going to get the text. So get item text. And then I'm going to try to cast it to a float. So I'm going to have a try except block here. And value is going to be float. And if that casting fails, I'm going to get a value error. And I just want to return. But before I do that, I need to revert this value to the original attribute value because nothing's being changed. For this, I need to create another helper method. And this one's going to be called revert original value. So this is going to take the stored value and replace it in the text field. So I'm going to pass in the item and whether or not this is a Boolean or not. I'm first going to retrieve the original value from the stored data. So get item value. And then if I'm dealing with a Boolean, I'll set the item checked based on that original value. Otherwise, this is a float. And I'm going to set the item text. And once again, I want to convert this float to a nicely formatted string. So I'm going to call float to string. And I'm just going to pass in the original value. Back up in the update attribute method. If I do get this value error, I can now revert by calling that method. So self.revert original value. The next thing I'm going to do is set the value on the object inside of Maya. And this is done by using the setAdder command. Once again, I'm going to use a try except block here, just in case setting the attribute fails. I'm going to pass in the attribute name. Now this needs to be the full attribute name, which is the node name plus the attribute name. So visibility or translate X, translate Y, etc. This is something that will be handled in the onCellChanged method. And then the full attribute name is being passed in as the parameter. And setAdder just requires the value as well as the attribute name. Now if this does fail, I'm going to revert the original value. So again, self.revert original value. I'm going to pass in the item as well as whether or not this is a Boolean. And then I'm going to return again. The last thing I need to do is to verify that the value of the attribute that I've set is the same as what is currently set. So that's to say Maya hasn't modified it in any way. So I'm just going to get the new value using the getAdder command. and then I'm going to update the item. So if this is a Boolean, I'm going to set item checked to the new value. Otherwise, I'm going to set the item text. And again, this will be a floating point value, so I have to format it. Float to string, new value. And then I'm also going to store that value in the item. So set item value, new value. Now I am showing a few errors here, and I'm just not passing in the item as a parameter to my set methods. So set item text, this should also have an item being passed in. And here I've also got a warning, and that's because I'm trying to cast the value instead of the text. So I'll just update that quickly. The only thing left to do now is to call this method from onCellChanged. So right now, if it's column 1, it's calling the rename method. Otherwise, I want to call update attribute or update adder. And then I need to pass in the full attribute name as well as the item and whether or not it's a Boolean. For the full attribute name, I'm going to create one final method, and this is get full attribute name. And it's going to take in a row as well as an item. And the reason for taking in the row is so I can get the node name. So my node name is going to be the table widget item for this row, and then we know it's always column 1. And from that I want to get the data for the value roll. And then I just need to combine them. So I'm going to return the combined string, which is going to be my node name separated by a dot, followed by the attribute name. Back up in onCellChanged, I can now pass in the full attribute name. And I'm going to pass in the row as well as the item. And then I'll pass the item to my update attribute method, as well as whether or not this is a Boolean item. And this is a Boolean if the column equals 0. And I'll just pass that in. With that hooked up, I can test everything out now. So I'm going to bring up my table, and I'll also bring up my outliner. So I'll double check that I can change my names. It's my cone 2, and that updates correctly. I can toggle my visibility. And I can also change my translation values. So I did just notice one problem, and that's my translate Y and my translate Z values are not setting the correct values. And jumping back into the code quickly, I can see that my insert item, I have a cut and paste error where everything is adjusting translate X. So it needs to be translate X, translate Y, and translate Z. Now I can jump back in and verify that translate Z is working and translate Y is working as well. While editing this video, I did find one additional bug with the code, and that's in this value error exception. Right now, if I put in an incorrect value for a translation, so if I give it a string instead of a float, it's not reverting to the original value. And this is because I'm not calling the actual method. I need to pass in item as well as isBoolean, And now when I run this code again, and I try to set an incorrect value for translate X, it will revert to the correct value. And that wraps up all of the work on this dialog. But there is still one more lesson in this mini-series on QTableWidgets, where I will demonstrate how to insert your own widgets into the cells instead of using QTableWidget items.